Well, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of SOS America. I'm Charles Feldman, your host, and it is aimed at both the audience here in the United States, but also for people who may be watching or listening in other countries who may be wondering, probably are wondering, to be quite honest, what in the hell is happening in the United States right now? People who are wondering whether or not it is safe to travel to the United States, whether it's safe to send children to school in the United States, whether it's okay to do business with the United States, a whole host of issues. And each week we aim to speak with different experts, both in the United States and overseas, to talk about those very issues and hopefully answer some questions. Today, I'm very pleased to have as a guest on our podcast Rachel Fiset. She is a well-known and noted United States trial attorney based in the Los Angeles area, where I happen to be too. Rachel, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited about your show.
Thank you. Uh, so, just as a way of introduction, tell viewers and listeners just a little bit about who you are.
I'm an attorney here in California. I practice white collar criminal defense, and I do all manner of civil litigation. And our system is very different than systems around the globe, but we enjoy a lot of rights under the Constitution and our right to get into court. And so I have facilitated that in both areas, both criminal law and in various disputes among private parties.
There are people, and it's interesting what you just said about how here in the United States, the criminal justice system is different than a lot of parts of the world. And as part of that, part of what makes it different, right, is that there are laws, there are rules about how potential defendants are to be treated, how one makes one's way through the court system, the ability to require an attorney if you don't have an attorney, all those sorts of things. And it differs by different countries, and we have our own ways here. I'm guessing, Rachel, that there are people who are in other parts of the world, if they are following US news, who are looking at images, who are reading articles about people, and I'm talking primarily now about immigrants into the country, the United States, who may have entered into the US illegally. But the issue that is making news, of course, is the way they are then being shuffled through, if that's the right way to put it, the justice system, because it seems, I would think, to an observer outside the United States, maybe inside too, that the system that one would think should be operating is not. Is that an accurate perception, or is it an exaggerated one, do you think?
I think the issues here revolve around due process. And what we are seeing, I believe, is an erosion or a change in what due process looks like. So under the Constitution, we are entitled to various due process rights. I think there is arguably less due process rights for someone who is not a citizen. But what we have seen in the past is a different version of due process in many ways in how people go through our immigration system when they arrive at the United States or are found here illegally, or they go through an asylum process, various processes to become legal inside of the United States. And what we're seeing right now appears to be a much faster allegedly due process or no due process. We're seeing people picked up and taken out. And that is where I think the change is. And I don't know that the courts have caught up to the mass amount of deportations under a quick manner yet. And frankly, what that due process right exactly is, and are we violating it?
There are images on television that I know are viewed around the world of federal agents, with masks concealing most, in some cases, almost all of their faces, in unmarked cars picking people up. And I'm guessing that there are people in countries that have gone through rough periods in their own history, authoritarian periods when people would sort of, show up in the middle of the night, knock on the door with masks, haul somebody away, and they would, disappear, that sort of thing. Um, how disturbing should those images be, not just to Americans, but for people who are watching overseas? Should it give them concern?
I believe it should. I think that this is shaky ground as it relates to how we have done this kind of thing in the past. Right now, we are affirmatively seeking innocent people who are here illegally, and there is no way to know that in the broad scale manner that we are doing it right now. So I don't believe we have probable cause for many of what's going on right now. I think there are just raids on people. They are ripping them out of their cars. They are getting them at the playground. They are getting them at school graduations. And these kinds of things are unprecedented. We have not seen this as it relates to illegal immigration. We have seen deportations in the past. We have seen America refuse entry to many people in the past, but we have not seen it on an affirmative scale in this way, where we are going in and actively looking for people we don't know exist and then shipping them out. And I believe the courts need to catch up, or these cases have not yet been brought as to what the legality is of that under what would be our current or really our past set of rules as it relates to immigration enforcement.
Right, but when you talk about the courts needing to catch up, so let's say they catch up. So what? They have no army. They do have, I guess, federal marshals, but federal marshals, as you know, fall under the executive branch of government. So the courts catch up. Then what?
I mean, I think what you're posing here, Charles, is, are we a lawless society? Does it
That's
matter?
exactly, you got it right on. You hit it right on the head, Rachel. Yes, that's exactly what I'm posing. And
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting we are, but I'm asking if we are, or if we are on the verge of that.
At this point, I think that is an unknown. Will the federal government follow court order? And we are seeing instances where they have not. And this is a very scary situation because we are a system of checks and balances. And those checks and balances only work if each other follows, if the three branches of government listen to one another. And I don't know that we are in a place where that is happening or will continue happening going forward. There are, as the Supreme Court is how it is, I don't know if it's been politicized to a point where it cannot be a check. The lower courts are dispersed in a manner of ways, and so we are getting different rulings from the lower courts and the higher courts, which it is familiar to us, but we're not sure what's going to happen as things make their way up to the Supreme Court. And what will happen in the meantime, because though that process can take a long time, will the federal government follow the orders of the lower courts prior to a Supreme Court ruling? Charles, I don't know.
I posed the question to a previous guest on this podcast about whether the Supreme Court, since you mentioned the U.S. Supreme Court, whether it is not contrary to the way, I was taught when I was growing up in school that, the Supreme Court is not a political institution. It's, justice is blind, all that other stuff. And I posed the question, isn't it really a political institution? And the reply I got was, no, it's not political in the sense of being partisan, but it is ideological. I'm not sure I agree with that. And I'm not sure you can so neatly make that division between political and ideological. I think that they're kind of linked, but I'm curious what your thinking is on that.
I think the Supreme Court has always been a bit political. And by political, ideological, I think we can call it what we will, but we know one party stands for some specific set of rules and rights and interpretation of the Constitution, and a more conservative viewpoint looks differently. We could always count on what Scalia would do, what Justice Ginsburg would do. I think we have some, there's always been some element of it. At this point, it does appear to be skewing a bit more political. I think there is an argument there that ideology and politics have really come full circle. But the Supreme Court, for as long as it's been in existence, has been reaching tortured rulings to fit the justice's own ideology. I think we may have surpassed that at this point, such that they are very willing to just simply change precedent and feel like they have the strength to do so because they have the backing of the executive branch. And that's really not where you want to be. Changing precedent on a regular basis is not a place that works, because the society hasn't caught up to that. We expect one set of rules and rights, and when they become very fungible at the highest level of the court system, it puts us into whiplash, and it's not what we expect. And our country begins to shape in a way that our laws look different.
But how do you then, as an attorney, you're a trial attorney, how do you function? Because you have to do your job, and tell me if I'm wrong, you have to do your job based on the understanding that there are set rules and that the rules have to be followed by all the parties, whether it's the prosecution, whether it's the defense, whether it's the judiciary, that everybody is on the same page. And there may be disagreements, obviously, about interpretation and that sort of thing, but everybody is supposed to be on the same page. But the situation that you're just describing now does sound as if everyone is on a different page of not even the same book necessarily. They're on different pages of different books. How do you do your job as a lawyer?
This is where things get very frustrating. And again, we're still working our way through down to the lower courts and up to the highest court. So as the laws evolve, yes, what happens changes things. What was prosecuted as a crime, I will give you an example. The FCPA is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act is an anti-bribery law that the United States has always had as it relates to actors in foreign countries. The DOJ recently decided they are not going to prosecute Foreign Corrupt Practices Act violations anymore. So what was a crime up until January or February is still a crime on the books, but it's not prosecuted anymore. So things are changing and evolving. So I would guess there is a set of investigations and people that were targets of investigations or indictments as it relates to these violations. And now those violations are not being prosecuted. What do you do with the middle ground of people that are in the middle of being prosecuted for FCPA acts? Does the DOJ abandon their case? What is to become of those defendants? And while this is probably good for the defense on multiple occasions, it does change the rules of how we operate businesses, what is acceptable. Should Trump be voted out of office, or when his term ends, and the next
If it ends,
person, right, and the next person, the next president say, okay, now we're back to prosecuting FCPA cases. What about the people who have acted between 2025 and 2028, bribing foreign governments? Well, now are they to be prosecuted for an act that they were told they weren't going to be prosecuted for? This is going to create so many issues along those lines. There's multiple examples of how our justice system is changing. As it relates to immigration, there are so many people in the United States that have lived here 30, 40 years. And if they do not commit a felony and they have no reason to be on the radar, they're paying taxes, they have driver's licenses, they are going about living their life, but they do not have a legal status. And now those people with full lives in the United States since they were children can easily be uprooted and sent out. Well, that is a massive change to how they have been living their life for the last 40 years. So this is uprooting our general society in multiple ways because the changes are so fast and our society is used to a different way.
We've been talking largely about changes in this country that have been impacting immigrants, those who are here illegally, those who have been here legally. You just were talking about somebody perhaps who has been here 30 or 40 years. But let's shift the focus a little bit to the person who may be watching or listening to this in the UK or France or wherever, so long as they can, I guess, understand English, they may be listening or watching this, who they may be thinking of taking a trip to the United States. Now, this may sound like a pedestrian thing to worry about in the greater scheme of things, but I know for a fact, and I've read accounts as well, that there are people in other countries, even to our northern neighbor, Canada, of all places, I mean, Canada, that are afraid to come to the US. I'm not 100% sure what it is they are fearful of, but there's something, I guess, in their gut that is rubbing them the wrong way, giving them a certain degree of anxiety, and enough so that they don't want to come here. I know that the tourism between Canada and the US has, I think, dropped rather significantly in just the past few months. And I haven't seen any figures, but I'm guessing there's been a decrease even from other countries in tourism to the US. What concerns, if any, realistic concerns, should somebody who just wants to visit the United States have if this legal landscape is now shifting?
I think under this administration, it's very much going to matter what country people are visiting from, and what they look like once they get here, should they be profiled, as it relates to illegal immigration. And I think normal tourism, people are not going to feel it. There are National Guard in the streets. It does look different in various parts of the country than it did before. Being in Los Angeles, I'm seeing a lot of military vehicles. The streets are much emptier than they once were. The restaurants are emptier. It is looking a little bit like a different place over the last couple of months. And tourists and people coming here on tourist visas have always enjoyed a set of rights, but not a full set of rights as they would if they were a citizen. And as to that due process, should something go wrong on a trip, I think that's the true concern. What happens if they are either mistakenly accused of a crime or something along those natures? If they do commit a crime, what becomes their rights when they are here, and how are they treated once that happens, and where will they be sent to? I think there are perhaps some issues around that. I would say 90% of tourists would have no issues different, in visiting the United States, it's going to look and feel the same in many ways. I think the issues happen in somewhat unknown territory of whether there is an accusation of some kind of crime or they are picked up for a certain status and not able to defend that status in some way or given the
You,
opportunity to.
yeah, you mentioned Rachel in passing, and what was the phrase you used? Something about it, it depends where they're coming from, and I suspect what you mean by that, to be really blunt, is if you're a tourist visiting, if you're a white tourist coming from Sweden, you may have less likelihood of running afoul of whatever it is that's happening in the U.S. than if you're a person of color coming from, say, a Latin American country, or a black person coming from an African country. Is that what you were going for?
Unfortunately, I think that is the truth. I think that's even an issue at entry, at your point of entry here, and then ongoing because of the profiling that is happening as it relates to the immigration raids. And I don't know that is being taken into account as various people are being picked up for alleged illegal status.
Should people coming from other countries be concerned about their political leanings, or perhaps things that they've posted on their own social media? Is that something, they arrive, say, from they come from France, right? And they arrive at JFK, or they arrive at LAX, and maybe they've had some, nasty things to say about the current administration, and it's all over their Instagram, and it's all over their Twitter or X. Do they have any rights about that? Can somebody at the port of entry, in this case the airport, demand their phone, to, in effect, subject them to an ideological test by saying, "Let me have your password before you can come into the U.S. as a tourist, and let's see what you've been saying about the U.S. on Instagram or Facebook"? Can they do that?
I'd like to think that we are not there at this point. I believe that any court in any jurisdiction would say that was a violation of the tourist's rights, particularly if what you're looking for is, what was your free speech. I think any agent that were to take a phone would say there was another reason they were taking it, that it wasn't for ideology, but perhaps danger or terrorism. So there would be some other basis that would be alleged why these phones were taken. And then there some safety concern, some alleged national security safety concern. So I would like to think that the court systems would stop this if this were to happen, and the executive branch would follow that law. Again, if we're in a society where it's not working properly among the branches, all of this is all off. But as to how we are supposed to work, that would not be legal. A court would declare it was not allowed, and that behavior would be ceased. So that's how it's supposed to work at this point.
Let's reverse the process. Somebody's been living in the United States, originally from another country, but they're here legally. Now they want to visit family, and they want to visit family whether it's in Western Europe or the Mid East or South or Central America, whatever. Should they have concerns about, once they leave the country to these places, getting back without any issues?
Are you saying they're here legally or illegally?
No, legally, but they, either they're now U.S. citizens or they're here. Well, actually, let's back off of U.S. citizens. That may make it a little bit more problematic to discuss. Let's say somebody's here in a green card, right? So they're here legally, and now they want to go back. They're they want to have their aunt's birthday party or their grandmother's funeral or whatever it is. Um, should they be thinking twice, three, four, five times before they get on a plane and make that trip because of any concern of getting back?
All I can say is how the system is supposed to be working, which is there should be no concerns if you are here legally, if you are a green card holder, and there is a way for your entry back into the United States legally. Again, as due process rights are stripped, if there is an accusation at the entry or an accusation that something would disqualify you from remaining a green card holder, that's where our issues are, is the accusation or the basis for some sort of refusal to be let back into the country. And that's where the due process rights really matter. And we are seeing what looks like an erosion of the due process rights. So an accusation might get you deported without you ever having a chance to defend yourself, which is not how the system is attempted to be set up.
You know what I find truly amazing as we're having this discussion, and also I suppose sad at the same level that we are even having this kind of discussion. Um, because I'm thinking back, I've been in the news business and doing interviews for 40 plus years. And I can honestly say, and I'm searching my memory to make sure I'm not uh, misspeaking here, and I'm pretty confident I'm not. I can honestly say, Rachel, that until recently, these kind of discussions that you and I are having and that I've had with others would have been considered crazy for, I mean, if you would have had this kind of discussion, is it safe to come back into the US? Is it okay to come to the US? What happens if they grab your iPhone? What happens if you said nasty things about a particular person in an administration, that sort of thing? No, maybe I'm being naive, but I don't remember a time when that kind of discussion, at least in sort of quote mainstream media, and even not so mainstream media, what would have been entertained. It would have been considered so far out there that people would have chuckled and go, "Oh, I mean, that's crazy talk." But yet here we are having that kind of discussion.
I think McCarthyism, I think this has happened in the past. And yes, it was a long time ago and we believed we were through this, but I think we are in a cycle where we are familiar with how this goes. We are familiar with how, you know, singling out various groups of people looks like. I don't think this is new in history in various countries. Um, it's how we want to go forward as a country and how we will get there. Is this how we want to be as a country? Is this how we want to live? Um, are we comfortable with having less rights to free speech, less religious protections or protections between religion and state? Are we what kind of country do we want to evolve as? Because we are making a huge shift, and so it's a huge shift societally, and it appears to be contrary to law as it has grown. But you now have a Supreme Court rolling back the laws, rolling back our precedents. So I would say this is not unprecedented. It feels like whiplash. And then our country needs to develop a strategy for how we want our laws to look, how we want our system of checks and balances to go forward, and how we can implement it, perhaps, so this kind of thing doesn't happen again.
I wasn't going to go there for this particular episode, but I will because of something you said. And I agree with you about McCarthyism, which for those who are in other parts of the of the world, and even I guess for people who are younger in this part of the world, just briefly to explain, Senator McCarthy in the late 50s was a vehement anti-communist, and there were all these sort of witch hunts for people in various spheres of American academia, business, motion pictures, you have it. They were looking for, communists under every bed. People were being asked to rat on their neighbors, to tell the government whether they think the person across the street is a card-carrying member of the Communist Party. And eventually, and you're quite right, Rachel, McCarthyism uh, ended up dying, and eventually so did the senator. And we returned to a semblance of normality. But there was a key difference, I think, and that is that one of the things that brought McCarthyism to an end was the pushback, uh, actually from the media, and I'm thinking of the Edward R. Murrows of the day, and there was an enormous amount, not all, I mean, lots of the media caved in, but there was a lot of pushback from mainstream media to McCarthy, and that helped sort of knock a demagogue off of a pedestal. I'm not so sure that we're seeing that now in this country. What I see is I see mainstream media basically caving in. Do you?
There is a lot of capitulating and a lot of fear. And we haven't seen that for a long time. I don't remember when the media has feared an administration in this way, but it appears they do, and all of this is financially motivated as well. You don't want to be canceled or have different regulations placed on you based on your type of media, is what many, I'm sure, of the heads of these companies are thinking. And so everybody is hedging a bit so that they can continue their business. So yes, that is incredibly different. But until the population calls on their Congress people to stop what is happening, and Congress has the absolute power to stop this, and they are not. So right now, what is happening in the country appears to be comfortable, okay, and satisfactory to the majority, because otherwise they will start threatening their congresspeople, threatening the political power of those that be. We still have our rights to vote. And until we are voting in a different way, this is going to keep happening. And so it's not up to the media necessarily. The media is there to inform us of what is going on. And yes, they are businesses and everybody is for profit. So what is good for their bottom line may not be good for accurate news reporting, but they are following their bottom line. So there is a responsibility to change in some ways, but I don't know that they will. It is got to be the population that calls on their congresspeople, and Congress has to make a change. Congress has the power to impeach. I mean, Congress can make this change, and they are not. And I agree that the media and population and how people see it all go together, so it becomes incredibly complicated. But at this point, we are living in what feels like two separate societies. And those that are dissatisfied with how this society is changing feel somewhat powerless because of Congress and the way that who's in control and how people are stepping in line behind the acts of this administration.
So if you are in another country and you're taking a civics course on the United States for whatever reason, and you take it, and you read, as we have all read growing up in this country, that it is a country with three co-equal branches of government, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative, then I put down my textbook in Barcelona in my course on U.S. Uh, governance, U.S. Structure, that sort of thing, civics. I put down my textbook and I raise my hand to the professor in the front of the room and I say, "Well, wait a minute, professor. This says that the U.S. has three equal co-branches of government, but everything I read, it seems as if one person is running the show. Is that student right?"
This is our problem. So this is Congress absolutely has the most power to make changes. They are not. So for whatever reason, they are not. And I think that's because Congress thinks the public supports Trump and each of those members don't want to be voted out. So they are doing what they believe their constituents want. As to the judicial branch, they gave a lot of power to the president last year when they gave executive immunity for most acts under the presidency. So what we are going to see and what we are seeing come up through various court cases right now as we speak, including the recent one relating to the National Guard being in Los Angeles, and that being an okay power for the president to have ordered, is we're going to see a lot of cases about pushing the authority of the executive branch. And that's what's going to be running through the court and up to the Supreme Court, who clearly has the ideology that the executive branch has a lot of power. And so they are through right now, what is happening is through the court system, the executive branch is gaining more and more and more legal authority than what we may think was initially contemplated by our founding fathers.
Yeah, let me ask you to backtrack just a bit on the Supreme Court ruling that you were alluding to from last year. Can you explain to people briefly what that ruling in effect has done? And my question that's sort of piggybacking on that is, by that ruling, has it fundamentally changed the nature of America?
I think that ruling has given the president more power than was contemplated. What that ruling states in very simple terms is the president can almost be accused of no crimes during the tenancy of presidency. So while a sitting president is there, they can make almost any decision they want, and there will be no crime. And that was not the understanding of the law prior to that, because it extends the duties for perhaps personal gain or a criminal act inside of the office, again, for personal gain, outside of the duties that we think of that relate directly to the executive branch. It allows a bit more rogue duty and criminal duties. I mean, there is absolution for what could be considered crimes while sitting in office. So once you now have a presidential office that cannot be accused of crimes, and it ripens that area for potential abuse. Now, what we would think is, as a population, how could we possibly ever vote in somebody that would make that office subject to criminal acts? But that was tested in Trump's last term, as he was accused of crimes as a sitting president. And so the Supreme Court has said, while the president's office has always enjoyed a specific amount of immunity, they extended the immunity as to criminal acts. And that, again, that usurps the branches of the other governments, those that legislate and make up what is a crime, what the statutory basis of criminal acts are. Well, if somebody does not have to adhere to that, that changes the power balance among the three branches of government.
I'm curious, as we sort of wrap up, Rachel, uh, what sort of conversations do you have with fellow lawyers in this country? And perhaps, I don't know if you have friends who are attorneys in other countries. What kind of conversations do you have about concerns of what is happening here? Are there people you talk to in the legal profession here or elsewhere who are very supportive, who say, "Oh, it's about time that these things happen"?
There are less of those people, but of course that exists. I mean, there are supporters of what is happening in this administration. I mean, that is why we are here.
And many are attorneys. Many.
Many are attorneys. There is a cadre of attorneys that support what is happening. And in one aspect, I think how we got here is we have some factions of people that really believe some specific thing as it relates to this administration. So you might have a bunch of activists that do not believe in a woman's right to choose. Well, this was the administration and the court makeup to change precedent where a woman would have a right to choose in all 50 states. So those people support this administration, and they may look the other way on immigration. You have some people that seriously believe in this immigration raid and deportation, and they may have a different view on a woman's right to choose or some other aspect of this administration, but they're supportive of the administration because this administration gets them that aspect. You have others supporting this administration for the tax, the tax reasons and the bills and the federal government cuts. I mean, so what I think you have is not a ton of people that support every aspect, but you have people that are getting there through the slices of what's beneficial to them, and then they're looking the other way on different aspects. And that is really the population that is supportive of this administration.
Rachel Fiset, U.S. Trial attorney, thank you for taking part in this episode of SOS America.
Thank you.
Well, I want to again thank Rachel Fiset, who is a very well-spoken, clearly, and prominent trial attorney here in the United States, and often is called upon by various media groups to comment on unfolding legal matters in the country. And I hope as a viewer or listener, you enjoyed this episode. And if you did of SOS America, by all means, let your friends know, send them links. If you have a comment about any of these episodes, feel free. In fact, we encourage you to sort of make some comments on YouTube or wherever else you get your podcasts from. And hope you enjoyed the conversation and hope you come back for another episode of SOS America. I'm Charles Feldman. Thank you.